Today we're going to go over foreclosures because there seems to be a lot of buzz about the foreclosure market lately. A lot of people, I think, this is all new to them. A lot of real estate agents don't really understand this. Most home buyers and home sellers don't really understand what foreclosures or short sales or REOs or all these terms are. What a lot of things are when it comes to this. So let me go over and first give you some definitions so you have a good idea when you're talking to people so you can talk intelligently about it to them. First is a foreclosure. If you say a property is in foreclosure, what that means is this. In the state of Florida, when a homeowner ends up missing payments, it's usually 3 payments, which is 3 months worth. When they usually end up missing 3 payments, the bank goes to the county courthouse and they file what's called a lis pendens. A lis pendens is basically the legal notice. It's recorded at the county courthouse. You could go down there if you want, and they're pulled every single day, and you could go to the back and ask them where their lis pendens are, and you could pull every single home that they're doing this on. If you certainly want to go knock on their door and try to get a good deal that way, that's a good way to go. But that's what a foreclosure is. A foreclosure is the legal process that the bank is suing the homeowner, and it's public record, so anybody could find this out. The second is what would be called pre-foreclosure. What a pre-foreclosure is let's say a homeowner bought the home and they're maybe a month behind, 2 months behind. I mean, it could even be 3 months behind, but it's usually 1 or 2 months behind in their mortgage payment. They're not in foreclosure yet because the bank hasn't filed the legal notice, but they're in pre-foreclosure. In other words, if they don't make the payment soon, the bank's probably going to file that legal notice called a lis pendens. If the home has been foreclosed upon, and that's different than being in foreclosure, but if the home has been foreclosed upon, it's bank owned. It's other words, a lot of people and investors call that REO. REO stands for real estate owned. The other buzzword you're going to hear lately, and you might not really understand what it is what's called a short sale. What a short sale is, it's just really reversing what it says. So a short sale is basically selling the home short of the money owed on it. So let's say someone goes out last year and they buy a home for $300,000, but they're trying to sell it now and they could only get $280,000 out of it. Well, that would be a short sale unless they could bring in the $20,000 to closing, which obviously they can't, or they probably would have sold and it wouldn't have been a foreclosure. So that's what that's what a short sale is. There's a lot of instances where people completely overpaid for the home. Maybe a year and a half ago, they maybe paid $300,000 for the home, and now the home's only worth $250,000, and they can't bring that $50,000 plus the attorney's fees and the commissions and all the other stuff associated with closing a property. They just can't bring that in, so they have to, the lender has to be involved. What happens there is the seller ends up, or I say the seller, the homeowner ends up agreeing to the contract purchase price, but it's contingent upon the bank's approval. And what could happen, the bank could take actually weeks or months to determine what they want to do. Short sales a lot of times, like foreclosures, if the home, or REOs I should say, if the home has been foreclosed upon, could take a little while. Because keep in mind, if you're a buyer, you might write an offer on a property just to find out that 2 weeks later someone wrote a higher offer and kicked you out. So that is possible as well. Let me talk a little bit about the foreclosure process and how it works, because a lot of people really don't understand this because it's so new. First, you have to understand that you're dealing with a bank. You're dealing with an entity. You're dealing with a corporation. A lot of people, their viewpoint is, and let's take a $300,000 home, for example. They say, well, if the bank wants to get rid of it, they'll take my offer. Well, what you have to understand, it isn't the bank that makes the decision. It's the loss mitigator. It's the person who's determining, that's their job, to determine if they're going to take that loss. Well, quite frankly, it's not that person's home. Whether the home sells or whether the home doesn't sell, that person's still getting the paycheck at the end of the week. So what you really need to do is have a little bit different approach to it and think of it as a bank's thinking of it. When a bank goes out and they're going to do a short sale, or if it's an REO, they're going to get what's called a broker's price opinion, BPO. And they're going to send a real estate agent out there to get a BPO. They may do a survey, but usually they're going to do a BPO. So they're going to look at all the data that's sold prior to the home being in the market. So keep in mind, it's only sold. Well, they might bring the value in at the home of not at $300,000. They may bring the home in at $325,000 because they're looking at stuff that might be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months ago that is sold when the market was a little bit different than it might be right now. So the biggest mistake, and here is something that you're not going to read in any of these books and very few people know, and this is going to save you tens of thousands of dollars. You have to work off of the BPO. The problem is what all these real estate agents out there that don't know anything about investing are doing, they're going out and they're working off of the listing price because they think the listing price and the BPO are the same thing. Rarely is that ever the case. You have to beat up the BPO is what you have to do. You have to go out there and you have to provide documentation. See, the bank isn't like a homeowner, or I should say an individual. If you were to present an offer to an individual for, let's say it's a $300,000 home, heck, let's say present an offer for 2.25 to a homeowner. The homeowner is going to look at it and they're going to be able to make up their mind really quick. Yes, we'll accept it. No, we won't. Here's the counteroffer. They have one of three things. Banks don't look at it that way. Loss mitigators, they're in their office and they're saying $300,000 home, this is what it's listed for. We have a BPO that says it's worth $325,000. Why should we take 2.25? Why should we take $250,000? Why should we take anything less than 300 or 2.25? Or 3.25? So you really have to look at it the way a bank would look at it. The number one thing, and any investor will tell you, if you go to any of the investment seminars or anything, and I've talked to a lot of loss mitigators, which are very, very, very hard to do, but it comes down to documentation. You have to have documentation. I had an example, I have a home listed, just give you a little story. I had an example where a gentleman came in, the homes in the neighborhood are selling for about $180,000. We listed this home for $149,900, which is very aggressive because this is a pretty exclusive area, gated, security gated golf course community, by far the lowest price in there. When I say 180, that's what they're selling for, and that's pretty much ones just like this. Well, I had a gentleman that came in and he said, well, I want to write an offer at $90,000. And I said, it was a gentleman, he was working with me as a home buyer, and I said, we need to document this. And I was explaining everything I'm doing to you now. I mean, you really have to document it as much as you could get. Not just whether repairs. What kind of school systems are there in? Are there any pedophiles around? What's the crime rate around here? Do you know how many homes are owner occupied to non-owner occupied? Anything you could use, any documentation that you could get to show the lender and to prove to the lender why they'll take $225,000 for that home. And I'll tell you, I've seen in a lot of situations where a buyer has gone out, they put an offer in, say $270,000, they did not get it, just to find out that 2 months later the home ended up selling for $240,000, and they were wondering why. The reason is documentation. They didn't have documentation. Do you realize that most foreclosures, most REOs, bank-owned property, foreclosures, short sales do not work out? Most of them, it's something like 80% of them don't work out. And the reason is because people aren't doing their homework. They're not beating up the BPO. They're not doing what they need to do to convince the lender. And the lender's just, they're just going to wait for someone who will. And if they don't, it will go into their books as an REO. So those are things I cannot stress enough. It's, no one ever said in life you're going to do just a little bit of work and you're going to make tens and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. That isn't how it works. If you want to save money, what could take maybe an hour or 2 hours to do to get documentation together could literally save you tens of thousands of dollars when presenting it to the bank. And if you have an agent that knows what they're doing, that's great. If you're working with an agent right now, I would suggest sending this video to them, because the chances are they don't know. I mean, then again, I've been trained by the best of the people. I spent just in 2005, a few years ago, I spent over $10,000 just in education on foreclosures alone to learn a lot of this stuff. I certainly can't tell you everything in this tape, but I hope this helps. Take it to heart, because if you're slinging mud against the wall, if the agent's slinging mud against the wall, the chances of it working out just are not very good. All right, you have a good day. Thank you very much.